Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Start Out's The Founder's Guide to Building a Life Sciences Startup panel. My name is Patrick Doherty. Me and E1, who will moderate the session today with our fantastic panelists, members of the Early Stages Programming Board here at Start Out. So today, what we'll do is we'll do some quick intros, and then the panelists will have a discussion, and then we're hoping for lots of questions and answers. So as we move through, feel free to use the Q&A function to drop us in any questions that come to mind, and we'll do our best to get them answered by our star specialists. So to kick off, just a little bit about Start Out. Our mission is to increase the number, diversity, and impact of LGBTQ entrepreneurs and amplify their stories to drive the economic empowerment of the community. So that's why we're here. That's why we've joined the board, and we're keen to kind of put out some of these experts in front of you guys to hopefully live up to that mission. Just a quick note. Start Out has an international reach, and we are working to build the economic empowerment of our global LGBTQ+ community. We acknowledge that we exist in a global community, and the land where we exist internationally is not without historical context. So we acknowledge that colonialism is a current and ongoing process, and we need to build our mindfulness of our present participation. So just a little bit more about Start Out. You can see there that we're the world's largest organization. We have a community of over 18,000 members and support every year through our accelerator programs, programming boards, and networks and forums, mentoring, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you're interested to learn more, please visit our website, startout.org. There's plenty of information there. And lastly, we'd just like to thank our sponsors and acknowledge their support, for without them, a lot of this would not be possible. So with that, I'm going to hand on over to Yi, who's going to introduce the panel and kick things off. Yi, over to you.
Great. Thanks for Patrick for the overview. And so my name is E1, one of the moderators, and both Patrick and I serve on the Start Out Early Stage Programming Board, and which is primarily responsible for organizing and programming for this event. And today we're going to have a fantastic panel. I will introduce you, each one of them. And first, let's kick off with Chris or Juan, CEO and co-founder of Shimmer. Do you want to say something about yourself, Chris?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. Thank you, Start Out and team, for having me. I'm Chris. I'm, as you mentioned, co-founder of Shimmer. Shimmer offers mental health support groups. We're a direct-to-consumer product, fully online, born and raised in the pandemic, I guess. Pretty early stage. We're seed stage. We just raised our seed round, and actually came out of, I guess, two schools. We started it when I was at Berkeley doing my MBA and PhD, and my co-founder was at UCSF Medical School doing his medical school degree. But since then, after starting it, we had both dropped out of our programs. So Shimmer is not exactly a life sciences company, so I can talk a little bit more to kind of the process of founding a company, co-founders, fundraising, all that side of things, and leave it to the rest of the experts on the life science side of things. But thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Chris. Well, I want to clarify that, by life science, we really meant both pharma, bioscience, and health tech. So luckily we have both. Next, we'll have Jason Bellet, who is co-founder and chief strategy officer at Echo. Jason?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Nice to meet everyone. Jason, co-founder and chief strategy at Echo. Also went to Berkeley, so Chris, we definitely need to meet up, part of the Cal entrepreneur community. We started Echo already 9 years ago, and we're a cardiac screening and monitoring company really focused on helping clinicians on the front lines of care more accurately screen for and detect heart disease using the omnipresent stethoscope, which is already worn around the neck of 30 million clinicians. So we've built the first smart stethoscope platform that has devices, compatible software, and AI to help clinicians pick up disease earlier and then ultimately monitor patients at home more effectively. Just at a very high level, the company's raised about 125 million. So I'm very happy to talk about the fundraising journey for an entrepreneur and just how to navigate the path. And we work with both health systems and life science, or I should say pharma companies. So happy to speak to any part of the journey.
Great, thanks, Jason. Last but not the least, we have Hazel Valdez, Associate Director of OBI. Hazel?
Hey everyone, good evening, or I don't know, some might be early. I don't know where everyone's calling from. My name is Hazel Valdez, and I go by she, her pronouns. I am the Associate Director for OBI. So what does that mean? The Oregon Bioscience Incubator works with about 35 plus current companies within the incubator, helping them to providing resources like mentoring, advising, lunch and learn programs that have to do with how to understand the mindset of an investor, et cetera, and getting them happily graduated and hopefully into their own spaces at some point. With that said, we are actually the only bioscience incubator in the state of Oregon who has been able to, we're the first and only, who's been able to help graduate companies and move on to their go-to market products within the state, providing an ecosystem for the bioscience and life science and digital health spaces.
Great. So we'll kick off with the event with a series of questions, but before that, I want to just highlight that we wanted to leave as much time possible for Q&A. So we'll try to finish this, sort of pre-programmed question as soon as we can, and then so that you guys can address, and raise questions and put your question in the chat, and the panelists will answer hopefully, one by one and cover everything that you guys raised. So I'll kick off with first question. Like for a lot of the entrepreneurs in the audience, you probably wonder how they come up with this idea, right? And once you have an idea, how do you really get the ball rolling? Where do you go, etc. Right? So for this particular question, I think it probably pays to say a little bit from two segments of the bioscience, both the biopharma and biotech side of things, and as well as the health tech. So I will kick the ball over to Hazel first, if you don't mind, and we'll.
Thank you. How do you come up with the idea? Most of the folks that we work with, and I'm going to speak specifically about the OBI, their university spinoffs. There's, I want to say 75% of those folks are coming from OHSU, U of O, OSU, PCC. All of these folks have some kind of research they're doing, and from their postdoc into, hey, I think I want to be an entrepreneur. Wonder how that works. The other 25%, I want to say it's actually starting to creep up on that 75, is the digital health space, and folks who, because of the pandemic, have come up with this new big thing, whatever that thing is. But overall, ideas really, from what we've seen at our incubator, has been through the university space.
Sorry, I just muted myself. This is for biotech and biopharma, and just to clarify. And I think, both Jason and Chris are in the health tech space. Do you guys want to say something about that?
I'll take a shot at it, and Chris, hand it over to you. Yeah, we started. I mean, I can speak to our own journey, and we actually also started out of a university accelerator program. So it is really helpful when starting a company to have an innovative entrepreneurial community around you. So we went through the UC Berkeley Startup Accelerator, The idea came from my co-founder's senior thesis bioengineering course. And very often early biotech or health tech startups come out of university research. But the kind of key part for us was having the cross campus resources from the law school to the business school to the engineering department, and being able to tap into professors and advisors that were in the Berkeley community to help us really hone the idea. And then of course the incubator, where we could then get the desk space and the office space to really begin to bring it to life. So a million ways to start a company. It's much easier if you have a great idea that you're passionate about to inject yourself into a community that can support you and uplift you throughout the process.
I would definitely echo what Jason said. I think just speaking from our experience, the, I guess, seed of where it all started was from passion. So for us specifically, I have a close family member who has went through a variety of different mental health challenges. And through that experience, we've gone to dozens of therapists, psychiatrists, we've went to peer support groups, we've went to church, we've kind of tried everything under the sun. And through that experience, I saw a lot of gaps that were in the mental health market, specifically around preventative health and around connecting people to other people who are going through the same thing. So for us, it came from, I guess, frustration that there was something missing in the market, but we didn't have our finger exactly on what it was. So we kind of took that to the next level, which was understanding, okay, now that I know I have this problem, are there also thousands or hundreds of thousands of other people having that problem? So then we went through similarly school accelerators. So I did 2 different programs at Haas that were loosely affiliated with UCSF as well, that we did a bunch of customer research. So we interviewed hundreds and hundreds of psychiatrists, psychologists, people suffering from mental illnesses of all different severities, and then identified that the one core issue is that people aren't feeling seen and heard in their specific challenge, and therefore what didn't have the, I guess, confidence and tools to be able to take the next step that they need to take. So squarely in the preventative health realm. So that was one, I guess, like the whole passion, and then taking the passion and trying to affirm it through customer research. That's one side, I would say. And then the other side, I would say, is just if there are any sort of like structural gaps in the market or structural inefficiencies in the market, and also through customer research you can get there, that's also a really good starting point. So for us specifically, that was, we identified that there weren't enough therapists in the US, just point blank, and there are a lot of services out there that are trying to optimize within the therapy space. And so our thesis was, can we do something that doesn't rely on therapists, that leverages the power of groups, that leverages the power of other sort of healthcare providers to be able to provide something at a lower cost for people who are looking for it. So we kind of took those 2 angles and ended up where we are now, which is using groups and using peer facilitators. But as Jason mentioned, there are a million ways to start a startup. And I guess my personal advice would be, if there is some sort of inkling of passion that's in there, that's what's gonna keep you through all of the, or get you through all of the late nights and the turbulence.
Perfect. So it sounds like, 2 major sources are universities and incubators. Because I'm myself is also an entrepreneur, and I like to add a few resources out there. If you are sort of technical oriented, then I think another source for you to look into would be, in general, tech transfer offices at university and also at federal labs, and including a lot of academic research coming out of, DOD, Department of Defense, and there are, exclusive incubators, programmings that specifically facilitate the commercialization and translation of these research. So definitely a good place to look into as well. So as we all know, it takes a village to make a successful startup, and a lot of you guys have a co-founder in place to to work with you. So I guess most of us are very curious about what sort of traits that makes a good co-founder, and where do you even find them? This time I'll start with Jason, if you don't mind.
No, not at all. And I'm laughing because I'm trying not to make this an advertisement for incubators and accelerators in universities. But I think finding co-founders is really hard because you're entering into way more than just you're way more than just a coworker. It's this like pseudo marriage where you're on this crazy journey together. And as Chris mentioned, there's a lot of late nights and weekends and stressful moments, and it really has to be somebody that you trust to be in it for the long haul, to be able to complement your skill sets. And I think somebody who it's a blessing and a curse if you go into it with a friend, because you need to be able to give this person honest feedback and have open and difficult conversations. But a lot of the trust has to really be built up early in the company founding process. So somebody that you know, or who comes highly recommended, or is in the same community as you, but maybe isn't your sibling or your spouse or your best friend, who you are going to be able to give really honest and transparent feedback to, is super important. For a lot of early founders who have an idea, it's very often difficult to find your technical co-founder. A lot of folks, have a software product that they really want to build, and it's challenging to find that software developer or engineer who can really come in and bring it to life. So it really honestly involves a ton of networking and sales. You got to be willing to, a software engineer and a software developer in a lot of these tech hubs can get any job anywhere. And if you're coming to them with an unpaid idea, it's more than just having a great idea, but getting them equally passionate about it and giving them a seat at the table and really making them your partner. But I've seen a lot of non-technical founders struggle to find the technical co-founders, and the best way to do it is to go out there and network and pitch your idea just like you would pitch an investor.
Great. Chris, do you want to continue the conversation?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely echo everything Jason mentioned, specifically around complementary skills. So my background's business. My co-founder, John, who actually you mentioned kind of spouse or friend. So John and I have the same last name. So everyone thinks that we are married, but we're not. So I think for us, we found each other on a mental health Slack community that was specifically around startups. So that's a good place to look. If you want a specific industry, you already find people who are interested, so that when you are pivoting, you at least know that you're trying to go in the same direction. Which kind of brings me to the second point. I think it's really important that your values and vision are somewhat aligned. You're going to be making a lot of really big decisions together. And if someone wants to do like a public benefit corp and really values impact, and the other person is just trying to get rich fast, which both of them, none is better than the other, maybe one slightly better than the other. But it's good to align on those things early on, because they can be points of contention where in the beginning, if you don't know this person well, you might not notice those things because you're kind of in honeymoon phase and there's not really any big problems blowing up yet. That's a big one. And then in terms of tactically where to find them, so John and I met on the mental health Slack community, but I'm also a part of some really cool communities in addition to school incubators where people met each other. For example, On Deck, they specifically, it's called On Deck Founders. They specifically will bring a bunch of founders who are in idea stage together so that you might meet each other and engineer a lot of opportunities. I know YC does something similar, their startup matching tool. So you can kind of look for those things that are out there, whether within your school or outside of your school as well. But I would recommend trying to do projects together first, if possible. If there's like a hackathon you can do together, something where you can see when like shit's going a little bit sideways, if you guys work well together and if you think similarly. And I think just on top of all of that, just making sure that you guys have really good communication, and that the communication channel is always open. Things will always get harder. So if you can set up good hygiene in the beginning, it helps a lot.
Great, thanks, Chris. Hazel?
I think Jason and Chris hit on the one thing that we like to tell founders is know your network or your network of trust. It's not a running joke. This is a true statement. Find someone who has complementary skills from your own and have a really great contract in place. And I want to say that because folks who are super eager and passionate start to forget some of those fundamentals. If we're going to enter into this endeavor together and be entrepreneurial, what are those? What's my lane? What's your lane? Let's get that on a contract. But first, let's see if we can work together and doing a hackathon, or if you've worked in the life science space, if it's a scientist that you've worked with in the past and have done the research, or you've come up with that same research together, is that person the right person for you? Or are you both too scientific that you need to really bring in that business mindset moving forward? Know and understand that network of trust. Make sure that if you're wanting to, say, incorporate or open your business in a specific state or a specific location, know that community and get involved in that community. Join those networks of entrepreneurs who you could probably benefit from and start talking to. And think about things like, if I want to be in this space, in this state, in this city, is this city going to be one that will help accelerate us or move us forward to the next phases of our actual startup? Is it a place where I can use this community as the talent pool to move our startup forward? And is it an innovative place? If I decide, my hometown is Long Beach, California. I haven't lived there in forever, but I don't know what that innovative space looks like. But here in Portland, Oregon, I definitely know what those spaces are. So really get to know not only who your co-founder is going to be, and if you don't have one, and then you're going to look to that talent outside of that, of your own complement, of your own skill set, do so within the community that you think you want to be part of.
Hazel, I want to double click on the contract piece, because it's so important. I'm sure you've seen this at scale, but not only designing an alliance on how you two are going to complement each other, you three as co-founders, but literally dotting your I's and crossing your T's for how you're going to set up the structure of the company. Not all co-founders take on the same responsibility. Some are practicing physicians or practicing scientists, are not 100% committed to the company. Some are, lending IP or patents that they may own to the business, but don't intend to be actively involved. And very quickly in health tech and biopharma, you start generating IP very early on in the collaboration. And the fact of the matter is, some people find out when they start a company that they love the multi-year entrepreneurial roller coaster. And some people feel very proud that they kicked something off, and a year in, they're like, hey, good luck. And having everything well documented and well set up. The wonderful thing is that there's many law firms, big law firms, that have startup programs that will work with founders in the health tech or biopharma space to pro bono set you up correctly from day one. And then, of course, you ultimately pay it back once you've raised a certain amount of money. But really, fundraising proves to be very difficult at the seed round if you don't have your corporate structure set up appropriately and the founder responsibilities clearly delineated. So it's a really good point from a technical perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, for follow-up. This reminds me that, as there probably there's a saying in the startup world that there are two things that you want early access to. One is your own fantastic idea. The second thing is a good lawyer. I think lawyer is one of the few people that you go to very early stage. And like Jason said, having some sort of agreement that makes like a set up a good structure entering the pseudo marriage is very important. And I myself do some a good ton of angel investing, and from the lens of investor, one thing that really turned investor off is a very much an imbalanced cap table, which means that if, say, for example, if Jason is the one that doing all the work and the technical founder somehow quit after, half a year working on the project, but still owns a giant portion of the share, then that is not a good strategy going forward, because very much likely that the investor would pause when trying to figure out if they want to invest or not, unless your idea and the market is just fantastic and hard to pass on. Then I think you'll run into troubles likely. Okay, well, let's move on to the very related questions that for those of you who have recruited your management team, when is a good time to do that? And if you have anything to say about when to find them, that'd be great too. I'll start with Jason.
I get called on first here, and I have to come up with my answers. No, this is such an important question. I think it's so conditional on the type of product you're building and the lead time of your go-to-market. I think it's never too early to bring on, assuming you have your technical bases covered as co-founders, both a technical and a non-technical co-founder. I think investing in marketing very early on in your company's trajectory, even if you're building a biopharma company and you're not going to be on the market for 5 to 10 years, is critical. It helps you establish your brand. It helps you bring partners to the table. It gives you the ability to fundraise faster when you have a clear, concise story. And so I think a lot of, especially in the biopharma space, very technical co-founders underestimate bringing on like a chief marketing officer or effectively a head of marketing early on in the company's trajectory. And then I think the other key hire that you should bring on very early on is a chief people officer, slash just at the earliest stages of the company, it could be just an HR director, but somebody to help you build out a performance management system and a best-in-class high-functioning team and assist with recruiting. In this market, recruiting top talent is extremely challenging. And so in order for your company to grow fast and effectively, I think assuming you've got the technical basis covered on the management team, having a people leader, a really strong people leader and a really strong marketing leader are two really important hires. Obviously, from a CFO finance perspective, there are a number of startup CFOs that can help you get pretty far in terms of having your bases covered. But as soon as you start to really go to market, you're going to want to bring in an in-house CFO who can be in lockstep with your commercial leadership. I didn't mention commercial leadership off the bat because I think you've got to get a rock solid go-to-market strategy and brand and team in place before you hire your first salesperson. I think people very often rush, especially in the health tech space, to hire that first salesperson when there's nothing to sell. And it very rarely works out well. So take your time, in my opinion, hiring the sales team until you feel like you have that product market fit and that you as the founder have actually gone out there and talked to customers. Because if you can't sell your own product, it's very hard for somebody to sell it for you.
Perfect. Hazel and Chris, do you guys want to say anything?
I think for all the startups that come through the incubator, the biggest thing for us is how will you actually fund this company? And if you can't afford to pay the lease, then you can't afford to hire your next person. So the idea is one of our entrepreneurs in residence really do stress that from at least the very early stages of your company and you want to hire a management team, hire someone that is either going to be your co-founder and they actually take on that role, or step back and just hire someone that can help you kind of maneuver through all the steps that have to be done. In life sciences, there's so many stages and there's so many regulations or regulatory things that have to be proven to even get an NIH grant, to get an NSF grant. It's really most important that get into the incubator, at least decently funded so you can bring on that next hire to help you get that big first round from any of these grant spaces.
Okay, I think we're um, actually going slower than I expected, so I'm gonna, accelerate a little bit. So, fundraising. This is such an important topic, and to all of you guys, the panelists, how do you cultivate a network for fundraising, and what are some of the best practices for, reaching out to investors and specifically to the health tech space and the biopharma space?
I'll go. Fundraising. Well, again, reinforcing that network of trust. You're going to go hit up your friends and family as one of that portion of this fundraising process. But then it really goes beyond that. It's getting to know the local landscape and being able to network with those folks who are going to be part of that ecosystem that you're either inserting or disrupting or creating. What is that for you and what does that look like? I think entrepreneurs and startups at the center think about like intellectual capital, your info, technology, the story, the educational activities that go on, human capital, the talent that you're looking for. How am I going to pay for this talent? And like Jason said, given this very, very competitive hiring market, what really is most important? Then you have your financial capital, looking at your revenue, your debt, your equity. All those things are going to play into the biggest part, which is leading up probably to your very, very first big pitch round to a VC, maybe even an angel. But if you don't have those things in check, how is that going to look? So again, being able to tell the story compellingly, I think hiring, like Jason would say, a chief marketing officer, you have to be able to tell that compelling story in layman's terms, because trust me, I've heard enough pitches to where I'm basically hearing their thesis on what they think they're going to make money on versus please tell me what it is you're doing in 10 minutes or less so that we can determine if I understood it, then quite possibly an end user, a consumer, a corporation would want to invest in it or buy it. So pitch sessions are the best place. Grants are definitely in the running for a lot of the OBI client companies. And in the Oregon market, we have the Oregon Venture Fund, we have the Oregon Entrepreneurs Network, we have the Ben Venture Fund. These are all players in that space when it comes to fundraising.
I can go next. I think for us, the most helpful thing, not just for fundraising, for everything, was just doing stuff with other founders who are in a similar stage as you, or maybe 2 steps ahead of you. Every time you're doing something as a founder, you have no clue what you're doing because you've never done it before. And you're always really confused, at least if you're a first-time founder. And so what I've been really delighted to find about the ecosystem is that everyone's trying to help each other because everyone understands how confusing it is. So if you hit up someone who's doing something similar as you, probably not directly competitive, but something similar in a similar space, and you ask them maybe, oh, what are some investors that you would recommend? Or I'm thinking about this, how do you feel about this? People are always really, really willing to help, and you would be surprised at how quickly things turn around and you're now helping someone a couple steps behind you. So I really recommend doing things in communities. If you can join as many in the beginning, it was helpful for us to be in accelerators, be in different communities where you could just hit up on Slack and say like, hey, I'm trying to reach these 5 accelerators, or hey, I'm trying to reach these 5 grants. Does anyone have any advice? That saved us so much time in the beginning, and just being really targeted in your asks as well. So if you have a dream investor, just post on a Slack and say, hey, this is the one I'm looking for. I'm willing to kind of do all the legwork. You just need to forward an email and make it easy for them. That's been really helpful for us. But I think just being doing a lot of research, figuring out what you want or what you think you want, and then asking people for help. I think a lot of people like to be independent and they don't ask for help. So I would really recommend asking everyone for help. All founders love helping each other, and everyone remembers being helped a lot when they were in the beginning.
Awesome. Do you guys have any tips for best practices for reaching out to investors, or, you know, aside from tips, mistakes that you've made or hopefully other people have made?
I think you know, on the first point, on reaching out, you know, just to echo what everyone was saying, it's very hard to walk in the front door, literal or virtual, of a VC or angel investor and just start pitching them. The best thing to do is to get yourself on a stage and have investors come with the mindset of wanting to seek out interesting investments and find you at a demo day or in a TechCrunch or Venture recap, or, you know, in an accelerator presentation, and reaching out to an investor directly versus having the executive director or manager of the accelerator that you're part of connect you and have that shared individual that you both trust. It's so much easier. So I know we're really like pounding on the importance of incubation and accelerators, but in this particular instance, that is one of the biggest value adds of being part of an accelerator, is having the associated investor community and the warm introductions. I think a cold introduction to a VC firm or an angel investor is really, really tough. I think in terms of mistakes, running a startup is requires like a very specific understanding of venture capital and corporate structures. And I think what spooks a lot of investors are founders who don't fully understand the corporate structure of what they're building and how angel investment and VC investment works. I talk to a lot of first-time founders who don't fully understand what a convertible note is and what pre and post money valuations are, and you know what a board observer is versus a voting board member, or the different types of you know, equity rounds that you can raise. And it signals to the investor that you may have a wonderful idea and you may you know, be an innovator, but you may not be prepared to take $500K or $1 million and understand what that actually means for the corporate structure of your business. And so the great thing is that there's a lot of information out there for first-time founders where they can read up on how to raise money and speak like an angel investor and speak like a VC. Because when you get into those rooms and they ask you how, you know, what's the structure of your round, you can't hesitate. You have to be super confident and be able to speak their language. And I think that's a mistake that I often see founders make.
And I'm going to follow up to say that what Chris was saying, synergistically, communities of entrepreneurs, I see it time and again in having been at OBI and at Portland Incubator Experiment. They talk to each other. They help each other. It's not like you're in it all by yourself. You have to remember, entrepreneurs, there are a lot of them, and there are a lot of spaces you can occupy. And then speaking to Jason's point in the fundraising space, also know if you're in a state that you look up what the state has to offer. We have quite a few, we work with those investors. We work with one that's contracted technically with the state to help startups so that we continue that ecosystem and bring economy to the state. So don't shy away from state government, or don't forget about them, because trust me, they're always looking for ways to invest in their state. And if an entrepreneur has that ability to be here and do the thing and create the thing and create the service or produce the product, they will talk to you. And the other part of that is, it's true. If you don't know the lingo and you're not ready to talk to a venture capital on your own, we do things like these pitch field trips. So let your incubator invite the investors and you show up and do your pitch. That way it's a warm introduction, and it's it's dedicated time. Yeah, the last one we did, we had 18 investors and 4 folks from our incubator pitched. It was great because I think 2 of them are gonna get more funding.
Yeah, so being an angel investor myself, what I often get is a lot of LinkedIn requests, and I think a lot of these requests are being ignored, at least by me. I think a warm introduction is certainly helpful. I think what's more helpful is really invest some of your time in building up a credible LinkedIn profile, one that actually speaks, for your passion and the enterprise that you're trying to build. And for LinkedIn cold outreach, that makes quite a bit difference, believe it or not. Okay, so I will move on to a next question, which has more related to IP. And I know both IP and regulatory strategies are quite important in this space. And what are the good IP strategies you guys employed, and what are the sort of best practices? And this time I'll pick on Jason again.
Yeah, and I think at a broader level, early on, we hired an IP counsel who was also an engineer by training. And so he was able to embed himself in our engineering organization and in our data science team and help us identify patentable things. I think we're not patent law experts. It's very hard to differentiate, other than the most obvious things, what is unique IP and what is not necessarily worth going down the patent path. And it was a little bit of a unique model in that having somebody sort of be a pseudo extension of the engineering team and really understand the business at a fundamental level so that he could advise us on patents worth pursuing as an engineer himself was a really unique combination. So I'd say if you can find a consulting attorney who has some sort of professional background that is either in biopharma or as an engineer to embed himself or herself within your team, that could be a little bit of a hack. I'm happy to introduce you to our counsel. He's still doing consulting. And then certainly as you get larger, bringing on a large firm to sort of help you create an IP strategy, going out many years down the road, because that becomes a very critical part of your fundraising and your company's long-term value proposition to investors. I think the one other piece on IP is the IP is really important, but so too, things like AI are very hard to patent. So too are sort of building a moat around your startup and around your product with proprietary data. And sometimes you don't want to actually submit a patent because you end up giving away trade secrets in that process. So understanding whether it makes sense to actually pursue a patent or whether you have something differentiated enough that you don't necessarily want to, show everyone how you've built something and keep it a trade secret for a period of time is also a strategy worth pursuing. And you spend more time building and less time trying to protect, which can also be an efficiency part as well.
I will say that for life sciences, do your research, because if you go to file a patent and guess what, you didn't do your research, it's already there, then that's on you. And I can't stress enough how important, when we are in selection committee mode, we talk to these entrepreneurs and we ask, that's one of our biggest questions, have you filed your patent? If they say no, then we ask why. And if they can't give us 3 answers right out of the gate because of X, okay, let's talk some more and we'll dig deeper. And then we have some folks who have filed, but our entrepreneurs in residence, the mentors are saying, hey, that already exists. How will you work that in as a patent, knowing that these 3 companies have that same model? So be prepared. And lastly, and we tell every single one of the startups that come through, is if you're thinking about filing a patent, please consult with a patent attorney. And we have resources we can give you to do that.
Yeah, I would also echo that, never save money on IP lawyer. And, there are ways to actually finance the IP lawyer fees. They're really high, but they are worth it, because the consequence of having IP loophole is basically destruction of your startup, especially for biopharma. And I would say also that make sure that you do your own homework on the sort of the technical landscape, and be able to communicate with the lawyer, because the lawyer wouldn't know as much as you do about the space, even though they might also have a technical background. So definitely work with the lawyer. And then the third thing I want to say is that there are many ways you can finance that lawyer fee, either through state-sponsored, biotech grants, or incubators, like some of which actually offers to cover lawyer fees. You just have to look through the fine prints of the grants. So what are the I guess good practices in engaging lawyers? I don't know if you guys have any thing to say on that, and especially on negotiating licenses, or managing relationship with tech transfer offices, things on that nature.
I think that's where I will say, not only is the resources that you're trying to, if you're in a place that has the resources and can put some referrals in front of you, use them. But at the same time, this is that time where you're going to bounce off your co-founder and ask your mentor, because you really need one, or an advisor who's helping you through this process, to make sure that it's a fit. I will say that there are quite a few different types of patent attorneys out there, and really work with who, if you're in that space where you can be given a resource, ask those questions. How long have they been doing this? Who are their current ex, if they can disclose? Lots of different things have to play into that. I think best practice that we really do try and tell our client companies is align yourself with a patent attorney who understands the space that you will be in. If you can't, and it's a general patent attorney, then maybe you should continue to look for, but chances are there is someone out there that will be able to fill that space for you.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about creating an advisory board, especially for first-time entrepreneurs. Again, where do you find advisors, and what are the traits that you're looking for in a good advisor? And for example, when you have an example, a good advisor, like how do you utilize them, right? I mean, are you talking to them, every month, or how do you split the sort of the technical advisor versus business advisor? What do they do exactly? How can they help you? I will maybe if Chris, you still have time, you can help address that.
Yeah, I'll go first. I do have to hop right afterwards, but thank you in advance for having me. I'll drop my contact info in the chat. But in terms of advisory, we're still pretty green on this. We have one official advisor that's actually on our cap table, and then we have some informal advisors that are also investors. I would say, depending on what you're lacking on your team. So for us, we don't have a chief medical officer or a chief clinical officer. And because we're operating in the healthcare space, it's really important that we have someone looking over all of our official kind of curriculum and documentation and all of those items. So the first person we looked for was a clinical advisor. And I would say be really clear on what exactly you are looking for them. So we knew that our biggest gap was actually creating curriculum and being able to recruit and hire peer facilitators. So we specifically went out for a group psychiatrist, Dr. Amin, who also specializes in education and curriculum development. So when we came to him, we had very specific asks. We said, hey, these are the things that we need from you because we're creating curriculum. We need this amount of hours from you. How much of it is async? How much is it synchronous? So the communication was very open and he knew exactly what he was getting into. So I would say be very clear about what you're looking for from them. And then we also have two kind of more business advisors that came through accelerators that we work with, but they aren't kind of formally on the cap table. So there's different ways that you can structure it. That's our experience so far. We're still learning. I'm excited to watch the recording afterwards to hear what Jason and Hazel have to say. But I am getting kicked out of this WeWork. So thank you guys so much for having us.
The entrepreneur life, right?
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I'll drop my stuff in the chat, but thank you guys so much.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll piggyback off that. I mean, I think finding advisors early on can make or break your startup. Obviously, in terms of the advice that they can provide, but they also are a huge source of legitimacy, in that the subject matter experts in your respective industry believe in what you're doing. For us in particular in the cardiac and pulmonary space, when we set out to build the first smart stethoscope, I mean, we had the computer science, health tech, and data science background, but we weren't cardiologists, we weren't pulmonologists, we weren't the everyday users of the products. We were certainly patients and could speak to it from that perspective, but getting world-renowned cardiologists and pulmonologists on board with the idea, in addition to advising us on our product roadmap and go-to-market strategy, was really important. And I think, to Chris's point, have a couple of advisors that you lean on very heavily in an official capacity that are on your cap table, that are willing to spend a couple hours with you a month and work through challenging problems. But it's also totally okay to have advisors who you talk to once a quarter or once every 6 months, who really are willing to step forward and say, this is an amazing idea. I support it as so-and-so in the industry. And they get that advisor title because they took a bet on you early. And they don't need to invest. They don't need to buy. They just need to be able to pick up a call from an investor and say, yeah, I'm an end user and this is desperately needed in my respective field. And for us, and you can call them an advisor, you can call them a customer advisory board, whoever it is. But I think it's the end user that you're designing this for. You need to build an advisory panel around and make sure that they're willing to speak up for your business to the investor and ultimately, hopefully one day be your earliest customers. So I'd say it's never too early to start thinking about your customer advisory board and finding kind of the luminary customers, individuals or businesses that want to get behind you early on.
Yeah, I think that's super important to make the distinction, because you do want those folks who are going to be using your product or service, and they become your customer advisory board. In that OBI, we actually have a network of advisors that you can definitely pull from. And some of those have gone on to be not only just an advisor, some have become mentors, others have just become customer advisors, and then ultimately partly an investor in some one way, shape, or form. So it isn't never too early. It's always great to, I mean, from day one, when you're talking about your idea, even if it's just to your family, then that's a good thing to just start practicing more of as you network out, because chances are there are advisors in the industries that you play in that will be of value to you, however way you decide to use them. But definitely make it a point to get some. Don't be siloed. Do not insulate that way, because it will not be successful.
Yep. appreciate all the input, and I don't know if you guys want to say anything on, how to maintain a productive relationship with advisors once you find them.
Most of the advisors we have are in our formal advisory programs. So once they meet, they set their time, and then they also set their end date. We like to say, choose an end date first. Decide what you want to get out of it by giving me my out date, and then work that way so that as that date comes closer, are you hitting the benchmarks that you've asked for help on, or is this going to continue at X time? Essentially, it's almost like a mentorship program, but in this case, because it's someone who has a subject matter expert in your respective business, then really start with what's the end goal and what's that date for me, so I know what you and I should be discussing, and it keeps us on a timeline.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, generally speaking, advisors are key opinion. Many of your advisors will be key opinion leaders, very busy professionals, and so even if you get them under contract, as an advisor, in terms of their priority list, you're still probably pretty low, and so it's really on the entrepreneur and the founder to be respectful of the advisor's time, even though they've committed to 2 or 3 hours a month, whatever it may be. Make sure that you come prepared and you're willing to really give them a meaty problem to chew on and give you advice on. And then I think spending the time to develop that relationship with them, almost to the point that they want you to succeed beyond just thinking you have a good idea and they're contractually obligated to help. Like these are people who should introduce you, if not be your early customers. And to do that, they have to believe in you and like you. So, if once we can start flying again, it's worth it from an expense perspective as an entrepreneur to go ahead and fly to meet your advisor once a quarter or once every 6 months. Take them to dinner, take them to lunch, make them part of your story, treat them like an extension of your team. And then when the contract expires, they're more willing to pick up the phone and help you out.
Sounds great. Yeah. Let's switch to Q&A, and I'm sure that some of you guys have a question that you want to get addressed individually, unique to your situation. Please drop your question in the Q&A box, or you can, if you prefer, you can probably, let me know and I can unmute you and you can speak up. So there are a few questions. Kashif asks, where can we find examples or templates of good cap tables?
I'm going to make a plug for Carta, CARTA. My partner works there, and they are revolutionizing the startup cap table. So get on Carta early, and I think they have a startup program where they will give it away for free up until a certain size. And I think they have plenty of examples on their site and literature on how to structure it.
That's exactly who I was going to recommend as well.
Awesome.
I like it because it's free at some level, and it's a good place to start. It really is.
Yeah, and it scales. I mean, there's companies going public that are still on Carta, so it can take you all the way through.
Okay, we got another question. This is from Amanda. It's a quite long question. I don't know if Amanda, you're still here. Do you prefer to speak up? If that's easier for you, I can unmute you. it doesn't seem like I can do that. I'll just read out the question. So the question asks, like, is LinkedIn useful if your previous experience is not in your new field? My Amanda's work background is in education, but she's not launching a holistic wellness-based company. She's not sure how to navigate this. She never needed LinkedIn for teaching, but she's not sure how claiming that as her previous position helps her as an entrepreneur in a different field.
LinkedIn is my best friend. I lean on it so heavily. So I think, one, building out a persona for your company on LinkedIn, like claiming your company's page and making it look super professional, and well branded, and that you can tell your story concisely. And then, sorry, Amanda, I see you typing here. And then, yeah, invest in your LinkedIn connections. It's also a great prospecting tool. If you are fundraising or you are recruiting, well worth, in my opinion, upgrading to the pro, where you get more in-mails. And if you personalize your in-mails and request someone when you send them an in-mail, I find that you can actually get a pretty high response rate. So invest in LinkedIn. It's a great channel.
And even if, what you're getting into is not your previous background, that's okay. Because chances are there are transferable skills that you're bringing to your next venture. So don't just, don't self-sabotage and say, yeah, they won't. LinkedIn will be your best friend. Keep every skill set that you have on there, because those are all things that you're going to take moving forward with you as you create your startup. Just remember that. LinkedIn, for history's purposes, leave it in there.
And I would also add, from an investor perspective, as long as you can justify, create a story that's convincing, like why you're passionate about the idea and why you're creating the startup, leave it there. I think it might help in future down the line when you're trying to connect with someone who happen to have a similar background. Like, you never know. Patrick, do you want to take over the second half of the Q&A?
Sure. Actually, I'll just jump in on that last LinkedIn question. Being from a marketing point of view, it's kind of where I spend a lot of time too. I think part of the question too is like, how do you, if you're starting? The real answer is you just have to get in there and participate, and you just have to post a lot and respond and try to engage in conversations. It takes time. It does. That's the reality of it. But don't be afraid to. Don't be afraid to sort of put yourself out there and engage and start conversations, because that's the way you'll build a profile and a following and all that kind of stuff. All right. Anyway, so firing along from Andrew McBride, probably for Hazel. For early stage biotech biopharma not coming out of a university setting, what would you suggest for getting early wet lab data? What do you think of CROs / cloud labs? I hope that makes sense to you. So.
It does. And it's a really great question, because, in the state of Oregon, OTRADI and OBI is still trying to prove the market with regards to the necessity of wet labs in our state. With that said, I would say your best places to look is, even if you're not part of the university, go network with them. They will have other places for you. Developers within a state who are trying to market to life science, biotech, bioscience, biopharma, they're out there, and they will say that on their website page, what they are expert in. I will say, Oregon, and it's kind of frustrating, but we're doing a study right now with regards to proving the market for wet labs for our state. And it's taken us I want to say 2 years to get to the point where now, hey, state of Oregon, here's the data. Here's what you can do for that kind of ecosystem that is life sciences. Go to health conferences. I was just at the Boston HLT Health Conference. Lots of folks there that you could probably network with and talk about the spaces they have. But the key is knowing your actual state's view on that industry, whatever industry you're in, because chances are if they don't have what you're looking for within that state lens, then just go back to the known incubators and accelerators that are within your community and ask them, because they will be able to give some of those folks, like I know some of our very early stage members, they can't afford the lease for an actual wet lab. So what they do is they become members, use our address as a way to get grants, but then we ask that they partner with, say, a university who has that thing they need at that time. If we don't have that shared equipment, chances are within the community, you will be able to find something. But really look at what developers are doing now. I think in the new world order of things, there's a lot of free space out there that's not being utilized. And folks are being creative about what that looks like for entrepreneurs and what their needs are.
Okay, well, it seems like we have a last question. Can one ask for valuation? How is it determined for early startup? This is
Jason, you go.
Yeah.
So you typically start off at like 100 million valuation, right?
Yeah.
That's what angel investors want to hear. No, it's so tough, especially in the biopharma space, because I mean, I'll speak for sort of I'll give a vague answer, but for more like deep science, life science companies, I don't know how you typically arrive at like an early stage valuation, to be totally honest. But for health tech, especially pre-revenue, it's really tough. If you have revenue, you can do a revenue multiple, and depending on sort of if it's a software company, it could be anywhere in the 20 to 40x revenue multiple if it's aggressive growth, and if it's hardware, you're going to be looking at somewhere in like the 5 to 10x revenue multiple. If you're pre-revenue, it's really about sort of, I would say it's at the intersection of investor demand. So how compelling is your story and how many people want to get in on the round, and what's the supply of what you're willing to sell, and does that drive up the valuation? And then two, if you don't have a massive interest at the onset, being very practical about how you value the company. I think I've seen first time founders go out to raise their seed round and raise $500,000 on a 10 million valuation with nothing but a slide deck. And sometimes they're able to do it and sometimes they don't. But I think something in the 4x what you're raising for your seed is an appropriate 4 to 5x what you're raising for your seed is an appropriate valuation. So if you need $1 million, somewhere in the 5 to 7 million valuation. If you need 2 million, somewhere in the 8 to 10 million valuation is general rule of thumb. So yeah, short version would be for a seed round, probably 25%. You're basically selling 25% of the company, and that determines your pre-money and your post-money. What do you think, E?
Yeah, I would echo that. And the answer is that it's an art and science, and it's more of art than a science. And the actual valuation depends on the stage of your company. For biopharma, it's definitely pre-revenue, and it also depends on how hot the market is and how much willingness the investor are wanted to drop money And also certainly depends on how much data you have that directly related to the pitch that you're making. But I think I've seen I've seen usually a reasonable pre-money would be anywhere from anywhere lower than 20 million, and for that pretty much covers a lot of the biopharma space. And I've seen higher, especially these days in gene therapy, you see pre-money that's well above 30, sometimes even 40, because of the just amount of money that they need. Yeah, so definitely study on some materials online, and then talk to a few angel investors, because usually you get some negotiating power back and forth. It's not sort of something that you propose and they would just automatically accept. It kind of undergo this negotiation period. Hazel, I don't know if you have anything to add. If not, then we'll just move on to the next two questions.
So we did have a client company file their IPOs in July, and yay. The problem goes back to the whole state thing. Oregon didn't have a place for them, so Washington stole them. I want to say that company, about 240 million valuation, but that was based on the 10 rounds of funding they raised. And then by the time they post money valuation, 500 million to 1 billion. And now, and that's drug therapies, so synthetic drug therapy. And this person started in the basement of OHSU, moved to the incubator, 5 to 7 years of research funding and lots of more funding to then say, yep, we've got something. And then they really went after big money, like a lot, and they did well. Yeah. So we'd love a few more of those in our incubator too. And stay in Oregon if possible.
There's another question here just on related to how does winning on SBIR or STTR affect?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Getting non-diluted funding is always great, especially from NIH or NSF, and that serves two purposes. One is technological validation from experts, and this is huge. The second is literally money that comes in, which is not taking up equity, right? So getting those grants will and increase your valuation, and definitely, and getting those grants as much as you can in a reasonably short time period. Like if you're gonna, I've seen startups that bootstrap using basically funded on NIH SBIR grants for 9 years, and they're successful. And I've seen startup has no SBIR and they're just as successful. So it really depends on the type of research and you're trying to commercialize and the strategy that you go about doing it.
Yeah. I was going to echo that and just say that non-dilutive funding is amazing. But honestly, I think the most valuable piece is the funding is extremely valuable, but from a valuation perspective, it's just the very fact that you got SBIR phase 1 and even phase 2 funding can be transformative from a market validation perspective, because phase 1 is really investigational. Phase 2 is about your ability to commercialize it. And so if you can push your innovation through to phase 2, it's a pretty significant stamp from the NIH and their reviewing committees that you've got something pretty substantial.
And that shows your forward movement, and makes it very lucrative, well, in the eyes of the investors you're about to pitch to. Say, oh, okay, so they haven't just been sitting on their laurels and just kind of floundering around with this grant and that grant. It really is, once you start to get to those significant grants that are validating not only your research, the work you're doing, it's validating that you as an organization now is very serious about going to market this way. So just keep that in mind. I know filling out the paperwork's always the least fun of the whole process in grant writing and grants, but they're important.
And last thing I want to add is that, getting grants, especially, you have to understand the federal money comes in a very slow cycle. So if you have a very short time crunch, try to go out raise money if that's important to you. But certainly, going after SBIR for technical validation is paramount. I think last question is based on hiring from Joshua. Based on hiring experience so far, what did you not know and did not expect? Maybe you can share something you navigate through already or currently navigating through now. So things that surprise you on hiring, anything you want to share about hiring?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say a couple of things. I think when you go out to hire a role, it's very likely that you have a really pressing need, and you may find that you are in a rush to fill the role, and that you may sort of relax sort of your expectations or standards for the role in order to just meet an immediate need. And it's very hard to fight that urge, but take your time. The problem that you're trying to solve, by the time you hire someone, ramp them up, get them in a position where they could help you solve them, it's still going to be a matter of a quarter or 2 quarters. And it's still probably going to be you solving it alone or with a really nimble team for the foreseeable future until you can find that person. So you're better off taking your time and finding the right candidate than rushing to hire someone to fill what you perceive to be an immediate problem. Right now is a really challenging hiring period. It's the Great Resignation. There's a lot of turnover. And I think the most important thing is that people that are looking for roles that are mission driven and align with their values. So lead with your mission and lead with what you're all about. Build out your Glassdoor profile, build out your LinkedIn profile. And when you talk to candidates, you obviously want to take the time to understand them, but chances are they're getting multiple inbound, if they're talented, they're getting multiple inbound recruiter messages and may very well be at the end of the process considering multiple offers. And it's going to be their relationship, their ability to align with your vision and mission as an organization. In healthcare, we have a pretty significant advantage in that we're very often helping people live healthier, better lives. But also it's so important to talk about your culture and what it's like to work there and to invest in your culture. So sorry, a little bit of 5:30 p.m. roundabout answer there, but I think some of the biggest lessons are make sure that you're talking about your culture during the hiring process and selling the candidate on it as much as they should be selling you. Build out your recruiting profiles so that when they go looking on Glassdoor and they go looking on LinkedIn, you're representing your company and your brand the way that you want to. And then take your time, hire the right candidate for the role. And frankly, if it's not the right candidate, go into a performance management process quickly and move on, because as an entrepreneur, you don't have any time to waste. So it's a little bit counterintuitive to say take your time and then move on fast. But it's sort of a mantra that I've lived by, which is I'm okay taking the time to find the right candidate. If it's not working out, it's in the best interest of the candidate and the company to move quickly. So that's just a couple pieces of advice.
Hazel, you're muted.
Sorry. I will say building equity at the get-go. So you're going to start a company, keep equity in mind at all times. Our way of doing business today involves that you remember what that looks like. And you will find it in grants. What is your equity and inclusion blank in your business model? Keep that all in mind as you really look to hire your next employee or staff member. I will agree with Jason, take your time. I know it gets hard, but don't rush that. and always remember this phrase works two ways. You're not a great fit for the company. Well, you're not a great fit for me. So align your values, be equitable in what you're looking for, and know that as you scale up, you continually have that onus of being equitable to each person on your team for your organization, because it does build your brand. And these folks are ultimately your first employees or your first marketers. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, one last thing I want to add is that, I think never underestimate the difficulty of hiring and the importance of hiring. And a lot of first-time entrepreneur would think, well, hiring is just, piece of cake. You screen a bunch of resumes and you interview, then you get the people. Hiring is probably the top 2 most important jobs as a CEO or founder, besides fundraising, really. And definitely echo Jason and Hazel's comments on hiring slow and fire quickly.
Yeah, you said that more concisely than I did. That's great. And I would say the one last thing too would be, don't expect, I mean, there's gems that will apply for roles through the traditional channel, and this has happened a couple times, but the best candidates I find are the ones that you go out and source yourself, either obviously through a recruiter or you directly as the founder very early on, but you go to them. They're very unlikely to drop their resume into a virtual resume box. And that was a key lesson very early on, that you have to learn to be your own recruiter.
Yeah. It seems like the audience are done submitting questions. I'll give another 10 seconds, and if there's no more questions, then I will probably at the end of the webinar.
Thanks for pulling this together. You appreciate it. And really good meeting you, Hazel and Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, guys. That was very informative.
Yeah. I'm going to connect with you, Jason.
Yeah,
and Patrick and you.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, thanks for the audience and for participating and submitting great questions. I hope this has been helpful, and I think thank again for Startout for pulling us together and offering this platform. And have a good night. And I think this concludes our webinar.
Awesome. I just posted my LinkedIn in the chat if anyone wants to connect.
Yeah, definitely feel free to hit us up on LinkedIn.
Speaking of LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank
Okay.
you.
Great.
All right.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Bye.